What you thought was final was never approved by heaven. God is rewriting what you learned to live with. Chosen one, pause right here. Take a breath. There is a reason your heart slowed down as soon as you read that line. There is a reason something inside you whispered, "This feels personal." You didn't stumble into this moment by accident. You were guided. This message didn't appear randomly in your life. It was released on assignment, timed precisely to the season your soul is in right now. You've been walking with quiet acceptance, haven't you? Telling yourself, maybe this is just how my story ends. You adjusted your expectations, lowered your voice, learned how to survive instead of hope. Outwardly, you kept moving. Inwardly, you carried questions you were too tired to ask out loud. You wondered if the delays meant denial, if the silence meant no, if the pain meant you misunderstood your calling. But chosen one, heaven has been watching every step, even the ones you took in the dark. And chosen one, before we go deeper, pause for a moment, hit subscribe, and comment, "I received this," if your spirit is already responding. Because this message is about to speak directly to you. This is not a distraction, it's alignment. A small act of agreement before a larger revelation unfolds. There were battles you fought alone, nights where faith felt thin, seasons where clarity vanished and all you had was endurance. You questioned yourself, replayed old moments, investigated your own heart, wondering where things went wrong. Yet what you called confusion was actually concealment. What felt like loss was divine pause. God did not abandon the story. He hid the ending until you were strong enough to stand inside it. Listen closely now. The chapter you accepted out of exhaustion was never the final draft. Heaven never signed off on your limitation. God has been revising behind the scenes, working in shadows you couldn't see, preparing light that would arrive right on time. What felt delayed was being detailed. What felt denied was being redesigned. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not mistaken about your calling. The author of your life is stepping back into the narrative, and the next truth is about to be revealed. Chosen one, let's begin here, with the feeling you rarely put into words. The moment when something ended or appeared to end, and your spirit quietly accepted it as permanent. Not because you wanted to, but because you were tired. Tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of believing against evidence that kept saying otherwise. Those moments settled deep inside you, didn't they? They didn't just pass through your life. They took root in your inner world. For the chosen one, endings feel heavier than they do for others. You don't move on easily. You reflect, you revisit, you replay conversations and decisions, asking yourself where the shift happened. When disappointment comes repeatedly, it doesn't just hurt. It educates the soul to expect less. Silence becomes louder than words. Delays begin to feel like answers. And slowly, without realizing it, you tell yourself, this must be it. This must be how the story closes. But listen carefully. That sense of finality did not come from lack of faith. It came from prolonged strength. You kept standing when others would have collapsed. You kept believing when reassurance never arrived. You carried responsibilities, emotions, and expectations that no one else could see. Survival became your daily discipline. And when survival lasts long enough, it can quietly disguise itself as destiny. Have you noticed how exhaustion can make even the temporary feel eternal? How repeated disappointment trains the heart to stop reaching forward? You didn't stop believing because you stopped trusting God. You stopped expecting because you were protecting your heart. There is a difference, and heaven knows the difference. Chosen one, God saw every time you chose endurance over escape, every time you smiled while your spirit was confused, every time you told yourself, I'll live with this, not because it fulfilled you, but because you didn't want to break anymore. That acceptance was not agreement, it was fatigue. And God never mistakes fatigue for surrender. This is why endings feel permanent to you. Because you invest deeply. Because you love fully. Because when you commit with your whole soul. So when something seems to close, it feels absolute. But let me ask you something gently. Who told you that what felt final to you was final to heaven? Who told you that silence meant completion? Who told you that survival was the same as God's intention? What if the chapter you labeled over was simply paused? What if God allowed you to rest in acceptance, Not because the story was done, but because your heart needed quiet before revelation. Sometimes God lets the chosen one believe it's over, not to end the story, but to end the pressure. And as you sit with that thought, let it soften you. Because if this ending felt permanent only because you were exhausted, then what happens when divine strength begins to return? What happens when God gently lifts the weight you learned to live with? Stay with me, because this is where heaven begins to speak again. Chosen one, this is where many hearts misunderstand heaven. You were taught to believe that God moves when you push harder, pray louder, or prove your faith through constant effort. So you tried, you pleaded, you waited with tension in your chest, watching every sign, hoping every moment would be the turning point. And when nothing shifted, you wondered if you were doing something wrong. But what if the delay wasn't resistance? What if it was restraint? There comes a moment in the life of the chosen one when striving quietly ends. Not in bitterness, not in rebellion, but in exhaustion that finally turns into surrender. You reach a place where you say, softly and honestly, God, I can't carry this anymore. If this is how it stays, I'll live with it. And from the outside, that moment looks like giving up. But in the language of heaven, that moment is trust. God often waits until your hands are empty, not because he wanted to watch you struggle, but because full hands cannot receive. As long as you were fighting to control the outcome, your heart was tense, your vision narrowed, and your peace dependent on results. Heaven does not move under pressure, it moves under alignment. And alignment begins when you release what you were never meant to manage alone. Have you ever noticed how peace arrived before the breakthrough? How clarity came before the change? That was not coincidence. That was preparation. God's timing frequently activates after acceptance, not before. After you stop negotiating. After you stop chasing explanations. After you stop trying to force the ending you think makes sense. That's when God steps in. Not late, but right on time. Late intervention is not neglect, chosen one. It is precision. God waits until the lesson is complete, until your identity is no longer tied to the outcome, until your faith is rooted in Him rather than the answer. He trusts you enough to let you mature through the process. He trusts your heart enough to let surrender become strength. Ask yourself this: what shifted in you when you finally let go? Did your faith disappear, or did it deepen? Did hope die, or did it become quieter and more honest? That quiet faith is powerful. It doesn't shout, it rests. And here is the revelation many miss. When you accepted the situation, heaven did not accept defeat. God simply waited for you to stop carrying the weight so He could carry it fully. Acceptance was not the end, it was the doorway. Stay with me, chosen one, because what comes next explains why settling was never meant to be your final posture. Chosen one, this is one of the most delicate truths heaven ever reveals. Because settling rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't come with dramatic words like, I quit or I don't believe anymore. Settling is quiet. It slips in slowly, disguised as maturity, practicality, even wisdom. You didn't stop hoping. You just learned how to hope silently. You didn't give up. You adjusted. You told yourself you were being realistic, when in truth you were protecting your heart from disappointment. Settling often looks like adapting to pain instead of confronting it. You learn how to function around the ache. You learn how to live with unanswered prayers, unresolved grief, and postponed promises. You stop asking for more not because you don't desire it, but because desiring started to hurt. So you rename endurance as strength and call survival growth. And no one notices, because chosen ones are excellent at carrying weight gracefully. But let me ask you something gently. When did your expectations become quieter than your calling? When did you start telling yourself, this is enough, not because it fulfilled you, but because it felt safer? You didn't lose faith, you numbed it. You didn't stop dreaming, you downsized the dream. And heaven noticed the moment you did, even if you didn't. Settling doesn't always feel like defeat. Sometimes it feels like peace. A calm that comes not from fulfillment, but from emotional exhaustion, finally getting rest. And while God honors your need for rest, He never intended rest to become residence. The danger is not in pausing, it's in staying, because when settling lasts too long, it begins to shape identity. You stop expecting doors to open. You stop preparing for change. You stop believing movement is still possible. Chosen one, God interrupts this pattern not to shame you, but to save you. He knows how easily adaptation can harden into agreement. He knows how quickly coping can replace calling. And He loves you too much to let what you learn to live with become what you were born to carry. Have you felt that holy discomfort recently? That inner stirring that won't let you stay comfortable where you are? That restlessness that returns even after you told yourself you were fine? That is not dissatisfaction. That is divine interruption. God gently shaking what you settled into, because permanence was never the plan. You see, settling is subtle, but God is precise. He allows you to adapt for a season, but He never withdraws the promise. And just when you start believing this level is all there is, heaven steps in and whispers, there is more. Not more pressure, not more striving, but more alignment. So ask yourself honestly, where did you lower your expectations just to survive? Where did you stop asking, stop preparing, stop believing change could still come? Because the very fact that this question is stirring your spirit is proof that God is already interrupting what was never meant to last. Stay with me, chosen one, because the faith you carried without logic, that quiet, resilient trust, is about to be honored in ways you never expected. Chosen one, this is where your story becomes sacred in a way few people ever understand. This is the place where logic stopped speaking, answers stopped coming, and clarity faded into silence. Yet something inside you stayed. Not loudly, not confidently, but faithfully. You didn't have explanations to stand on anymore. You didn't have signs to point to. You didn't even have certainty. And still, you remained. There is a kind of faith that exists only when logic has gone silent. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue. It doesn't demand proof. It simply keeps breathing. It wakes up each day without knowing how things will change, yet chooses not to walk away. This is the faith heaven recognizes instantly, because it costs you something to carry it. You prayed and waited, and when nothing made sense, you stopped asking why and started asking how to endure. You didn't feel spiritual. You didn't feel strong. Sometimes you didn't even feel hopeful. But you stayed connected. You stayed open. You stayed honest with God about your confusion instead of pretending you understood His plan. And that, chosen one, is loyalty. Have you noticed how your faith became quieter over time? Less dramatic, less emotional, less visible. That wasn't decline. That was depth. Shallow faith needs constant reassurance. Mature faith learns how to trust in the dark. When logic disappeared, your faith didn't collapse. It simplified. It rested. It said, I don't see the way, but I still trust the one who does. God honors the faith you carried when clarity was absent. Not the faith you spoke, but the faith you lived. The faith that showed up without enthusiasm. The faith that didn't feel rewarded. The faith that stayed even when nothing improved. Heaven keeps record of that kind of belief because it proves your connection was never conditional. Let me ask you something gently. What kept you believing when there was no reason to? What anchored you when answers stopped arriving? Was it habit, or was it something deeper, a knowing you couldn't explain? That quiet pull back toward God, even when you felt confused, is evidence that your faith was never built on circumstances. Chosen one, God is not moved by noise. He is moved by constancy. He saw you worship without emotion, trust without understanding, obey without clarity. That is not weak faith. That is refined faith. And refined faith carries weight in the spirit. You see, when logic fails, faith is no longer supported by reason. It stands alone. And that is when it becomes pure. God allows logic to go silent so faith can speak without interference, so you can know Him beyond outcomes. So your trust is no longer attached to what He does, but to who He is. And here is the truth you need to hear now. The season where your faith felt unseen was the season where it was being most deeply honored. God never overlooked your quiet loyalty. He never ignored your steady belief. And the clarity that disappeared, it was not taken. It was postponed. Stay with me, chosen one, because the faith you carried without logic is the very thing God is about to respond to. And what restoration truly means will redefine everything you thought you lost. Chosen one, this is where many hearts misunderstand restoration. We imagine God turning back time, placing us exactly where we were before the loss, before the disappointment, before the pain. We picture him rewinding the story to a safer moment and saying, "Here, try again." But that is not how heaven speaks restoration. God does not rewind lives. He redeems them. And redemption is far deeper than replacement. Restoration in God's language is not about returning you to who you were. It is about honoring what you endured and transforming it into something powerful. The delays you hated, the tears you hid, the lessons you never asked for, none of them were wasted. God didn't watch those moments passively. He collected them. He layered wisdom into your waiting, strength into your sorrow, and discernment into your disappointment. Ask yourself this gently. Would you truly want the old version of the dream, untouched by growth? Or would you rather step into something refined, wiser, and more aligned with who you have become? God knows you are not the same person who first prayed that prayer. Your heart has expanded. Your discernment has sharpened. Your spirit has matured. So why would he restore you to something smaller than your current capacity? True restoration doesn't erase the pain. It gives it meaning. God doesn't pretend the loss didn't happen. He doesn't dismiss the nights you cried or the confusion you carried. Instead, he weaves those moments into the outcome. What once broke you becomes the very thing that strengthens the ending. What once delayed you becomes protection. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. Chosen one, this is why restoration often looks unfamiliar at first. It doesn't arrive wearing the same face as the old dream. It doesn't follow the same timeline. It doesn't move the same way. But if you look closely, you'll notice something holy. Peace where there used to be pressure, clarity where there used to be confusion, alignment where there used to be striving. Have you noticed that your desires have changed? That what you once begged for no longer fits the person you are now? That is not loss. That is preparation. God is not giving you what you wanted back. He is giving you what you needed all along, shaped by who you have become through endurance. Restoration is God saying, "I saw everything, and I will use it all." The waiting seasons taught you patience. The disappointments taught you discernment. The silence taught you how to listen. And now the ending he is preparing carries depth, stability, and peace the original dream never could have held. Chosen one, hear this clearly. A restored ending is not weaker because it came later. It is stronger because it came wiser. It doesn't just bless you, it sustains you. It doesn't just excite you, it grounds you. God is not repairing something broken. He is unveiling something complete. So if you've been wondering whether all you endured mattered, let this settle in your spirit. Heaven never intended to give you back the old chapter. God is writing an ending that honors the journey. And as we move forward, you're about to see how this new ending begins to unfold. Not all at once, but with divine precision, right on time. Chosen one, the new ending does not rush in with noise or spectacle. It doesn't arrive shouting, "Here I am." God is gentle with what is sacred. What he rewrites, he reveals slowly. Not to tease you, but to protect you. After everything you've endured, your spirit no longer needs shock, it needs certainty. And certainty in God's kingdom often comes quietly. The rewritten ending begins with subtle shifts you almost overlook. A heaviness lifts without explanation. A door you stopped forcing no longer feels locked. Conversations change. Desires soften. You feel less anxious about what hasn't happened yet. And at first you question it. Why do I feel calm when nothing has changed? But chosen one, that calm is the change. Inner peace is often the first confirmation heaven gives before outward movement appears. God doesn't reveal the whole picture at once because he's not trying to overwhelm you. He's rebuilding trust. Step by step, he shows you alignment instead of chaos. The urgency fades. The desperation dissolves. You're no longer chasing signs because something inside you already knows. Have you felt that? That quiet assurance that doesn't explain itself but settles you anyway? The new ending unfolds through alignment. Things begin to make sense without force. You're not convincing, begging, or striving like before. What's meant for you starts finding you. What's not aligned gently falls away without a fight. God is teaching you how it feels when something is truly ordained. Not rushed, not pressured, not confusing. And timing. Oh, the timing. It won't match your old expectations. It will feel later than you wanted, but earlier than you deserved. God moves when your heart is steady enough to receive without fear, without attachment, without losing yourself again. That's why this ending arrives with peace, not adrenaline. Let me ask you something important. Have you noticed how your reactions have changed? How what once triggered you no longer controls you? How you're no longer afraid of silence or delay? That is not coincidence. That is preparation. God is not just changing your circumstances. He is aligning your spirit to sustain what's coming. Chosen one, divine movement rarely announces itself with chaos. It whispers through consistency, through clarity, through doors opening naturally, through the absence of anxiety. Heaven's timing feels calm because it doesn't need to prove anything. So don't rush the reveal. Don't doubt the quiet. The ending God is rewriting is already in motion. Not all at once, but exactly as much as you need to see right now. Trust the pace, trust the peace, trust the alignment, because the story isn't ending the way you accepted. It's unfolding the way heaven intended. And you'll recognize it not by noise, but by the deep knowing that settles in your spirit and says, this is it. This is real. This was worth the wait.